As you know, I'm deep into boxing, and I've noticed boxing and race are very tied in together. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Well, the thing about it is, if you look at boxing when it started here, right, it started during the days of bondage. You had two black men with chains around their neck fighting each other, right? Sometimes to the death,
The Mandingo fights.
right?
Yes.
So sometimes they wouldn't have a chain, but oftentimes they have a chain around their neck, because again, we were animals.
And they would be chained to each other fighting?
They could be chained to each other, they could be chained to, outside object. It was just like, again, it was just like a brutal, barbaric practice because we were subhuman, right? So when that ended, of course, white folks still wanted to be entertained. So how did they do that? Well, they had normal boxing matches. And, the first real black heavyweight contender was a man named Peter Jackson, right? He was the colored heavyweight champion. The white heavyweight champion didn't want to fight him. His name was Sullivan. Didn't want to fight him because he was black. Really didn't fight him because he knew he'd lose, right? He used the excuse of being black as a way to get out of it. But anyway, so eventually another man came around named Jack Johnson in 1908 when he fought a guy named Burns, knocked him out. They didn't even show the rest of the footage because it was just so like horrible to see a black man beat up a white man fairly, right? So what happened was, we've all heard a story about the Great White Hope, right? And there was a man named Jack London who came up with that term because, he didn't want to have the heavyweight champion be a black man. So he wanted to get a white person to hopefully beat him, right? So he pulled a man out of retirement named Jim Jeffries, right, who was a former heavyweight champion himself, to come out of retirement and fight him and lose, right? So from 1908 to 1915, many, white fighters fought against Jack Johnson and lost. He very rarely fought black fighters because he was like, white people don't want to see us fighting. Although that was not the case. He probably didn't want to fight a black person and lose as well. But again, that's how that happened. So you see.
So would you say, not to cut you off, would you say Jack Johnson also used the race card not to be defeated?
Of course. He still was a businessman. And he knew that he would make more money fighting white people, right? So he didn't, fight black fighters primarily. He ended up losing to a man who was like 6'7", when he was, after being a champion for 7 years. Anyway, now after him, because Jack Johnson was very, bombastic, very outspoken, very, flamboyant, made a lot of white people mad. Made a lot of black people mad too. Booker T. Washington actually didn't like him at all.
Why is this?
Booker T. Washington?
Why is it that flamboyant black boxers usually turn off a certain segment of the black population, and then you see within the next generation a flamboyant white boxer come out and is loved by all?
Well, because we can't do what they do. That's one. And two, black people have been taught that if you are too outspoken, or if you're too, strong, or if you're too, forward, you can get killed, right? Like the symbol of the buck is basically Jack Johnson, the wild, rambunctious, out of control black man who has to be put down, which of course is also King Kong, right? So when you have a lot of, black people who don't like outspoken black people, it's due to fear of white people and how white folk will see that black person and see them associated with them. And also, it's some legitimacy there because during that time, remember when Jack Johnson beat Jeffries, there were riots that happened afterwards. And over 150 blacks were killed because of that, So I can't say that there was no legitimacy to the fact that there was some fear of white retaliation, but you have that still today, and like I said, the next heavyweight champion after him was Joe Louis, who didn't say anything. He said he let his fist do the talking. He put his head down. He was very quiet, very shy, and he actually was a champion for 12 years, according to Brown Bomber. And he actually gained a lot of notoriety for beating a German named Max Schmeling, who he first lost to, then he first lost to in 1936, then beat in 1938. And oddly enough, Rocky Smelling, the German, was a millionaire when he got older and had to pay for Joe Louis's funeral. So, again, the United States, who was behind Joe Louis right before World War II, and Smelling, who was a German, who the Nazis were behind, they actually made him a millionaire, and Joe Louis died poor. Now, after that, the next significant heavyweight fighter, wasn't Floyd Patterson who came next, or Sonny Liston. It was a man named Cashis Clay, right? Who in 1960 won the gold medal in the Olympics, and he loved it. He slept with his gold medal. But when he came back home to Kentucky, right, and wasn't served in the restaurant, he threw his gold medal in the river. Because he was like, this is nonsense. Why am I fighting and for this nation, having pride for this nation, and they look at me like a second-class citizen, like I'm just, like I'm nothing, like I'm a dog. So Cashis Clay, heard a man named Malcolm X speak. When you heard Malcolm X speak, Malcolm X was a black militant, black nationalist who spoke about not being conciliatory with white people, but loving yourself, which is something that applied to him. So Cashis Clay became Muhammad Ali and joined the Nation of Islam after he became the heavyweight champion, beating Sonny Liston. And during that time, he was hated by many, blacks. Like Jesse Owens spoke out against him, Jackie Robinson spoke out against him. So, because again, you had the Uncle Tom blacks who didn't want to make waves. And, Muhammad Ali didn't care. He was a man of principle. And for that, they took away his title. And for 3 years of his prime, he couldn't fight. Because he was against the Vietnam War, he wasn't going to the draft. He was not going to toe the company line of U.S. imperialism and U.S. neocolonialism. So you have this black man who represents black manhood and black power, and eventually he was proven right. So when you look at Muhammad Ali, that individual was probably the best athlete of the 20th century, maybe the best athlete ever. And the thing about Muhammad Ali is, there was a movie based off of him, a series of movies based off of him, right? Called Rocky, right? Because Rocky came out in 1976. Now, it was based off a man named Chuck Wepner who actually fought Muhammad Ali one time. Now, Chuck Wepner, the Bayonne bleeder, right, he was a heavyweight contender. He was another great white hope. Just like before him, you had Jerry Quarry, right, and after him you had Jerry Cooney, right, and recently you had Conor McGregor, right. They pull him out every so often to try to beat a black fighter who's obviously better than everybody else. So they got to try to pull a white person out to try to beat him, but they always lose. Anyway, so the Bayonne bleeder, fought Muhammad Ali, actually knocked him down, right? So Chuck Wepner knocked him down, went to his corner and said, yeah, we got to get paid. Corner man said, you got to turn around. He looks like he's mad. He's getting up. And he ended up knocking out Chuck Wepner. So anyway, Rocky was based off of Chuck Wepner. So Apollo Creed, the heavyweight counterpart to Rocky, the movie, was based off of Muhammad Ali. And they made about 7 movies in that series. The first one, of course, Muhammad Ali, Rocky Balboa, whose name also is significant, symbolic. Because you also have symbols and names too, right? So Rocky Balboa. Why is that name so important or symbolic or, purposeful? Because remember, everything in the movie is set. That's why it's called a movie set. It's not random. So when he named himself Rocky Balboa, right, Rocky was named after, of course, the great white heavyweight champion, as they call him, Rocky Marciano. And many people don't know Rocky Marciano except for the fact that he was a punchline of a joke in Coming to America. That's how many people heard about Rocky Marciano now because, hey, every time everybody talk about fighting, somebody talk Rocky Marciano dies ass, So Rocky Marciano retired undefeated, although his record was, kind of suspect, but he retired undefeated. He beat old Joe Louis and he didn't beat anybody else who was of significance. But he retired undefeated. So Rocky Marciano is the namesake of Rocky's first name. Last name Balboa. And who is Balboa? Balboa is conquistador, who's known for discovering Panama. Conquistador means conqueror in Spanish. So his name basically represents white men who conquer black men, right? So Rocky fights Apollo Creed. Now, what does Apollo Creed mean? Now, Apollo is a Greek god, and Creed means belief. So basically, his name represents the belief in the white god.
Apollo's the Greek god of boxing, actually.
Oh, there it is then.
Yeah.
So the first time he fights Apollo Creed, he loses, but it's a decision, right? Because again, Chuck Wepner lost against Muhammad Ali. But Chuck Wepner never fought Muhammad Ali a second time. But of course, Rocky 2, he fights Apollo Creed the second time, and of course he wins, right? So now you have Rocky 3. Who does he fight? Again, a black heavyweight champion, heavyweight fighter rather, Clubber Lang, Mr. T. First time he fights Mr. T, he loses. Second time he wins, right? Now, the fourth time you have Rocky 4. When I was a little kid, I watched this movie and it didn't make sense to me, right? Because in the beginning of the film, you have Ivan Drago, right? This is during the Cold War, right? Ivan Drago, he's talking bad about the United States, and Carl Weathers, who's playing Apollo Creed, is in his mansion, in his pool, playing fetch with the dog, right? And gets angry when he hears, Dolph Lundgren, who plays, Ivan Drago, talking bad about America. So he comes out of retirement, because at that time he's retired, and wants to defend America, right? So when he comes out, he has on the red, white, and blue trunks, and he has James Brown, singing the theme song, "Living in America." He's punching, this gong and punching that gong, and you see explosions, all this fanfare, right? Apollo Creed gets killed in the ring. And I'm thinking, he killed Apollo Creed? How could Rocky beat him? Because if he fought Rocky twice, it was 1-1. That means they're tied, right? So if he kills Creed, he can kill Rocky. So at the beginning of the movie, I'm like, where's this going? But of course, Rocky ends up not only winning, but knocking him out. So I'm like, as a kid, it makes no sense to me. Like, how, if they fight each other twice, and you really fought each other 3 times, and you find out later on that Apollo Creed won the second time as well. So really, Apollo Creed can beat Rocky. But how come Rocky had to beat Drago? Symbolism. So the symbolism is this: a black man cannot represent America, right? A white man has to represent America. It was a similar story happened in wrestling. There was a man named Rusev who represented Russia, right? At the time, he first fought, this big world-class powerlifter named Biggie Langston. Black man, beat him, right? Okay. So that next he fights the world's strongest man, legitimately the world's strongest man, Mark Henry, beats him too. Well, who can beat Rusev? Who can beat this big Russian? John Cena. So again, you see that same storyline paralleled in wrestling.
Are you talking about WWE?
Yeah, it's like, so it's the same thing. Like, a black man cannot represent America, for real. A white man has to do it. So going back to the Apollo Creed thing, right? Now a couple of years later, Rocky starts fighting again, right? And at 60 years old, he fights the black heavyweight champion again.
Well, you missed the Rocky in there.
But that Rocky,
the one with
Tommy Morrison. See, that was like, that was the only Rocky film that didn't contain race, as far as him having the fighter.
Well, as far as the fighting, but they did have the Don King type character that came in.
Right.
Divided the two Rocky and his protege.
Right.
That came in and robbed him and all this stuff.
Right. So they
did have the Don King.
They had Don King. Okay, so they had in the background, but right. Yeah, and I met the guy actually. He's a funny guy.
And actually, to go back to the Apollo Creed versus Drago, could it have something to do with Martin Luther King as well? And what I mean by that, they said that the civil rights movement was funded by communists. Could that have played into it a little bit, in your opinion?
Well, see, I wouldn't say that, because Martin Luther King wasn't a fighter.
Okay.
Right. See, the civil rights movement was not really. It was really a consumer rights movement. It was really a movement for black folks to be accepted by white people. So it wasn't really a challenge to the system at all. Because if you really think about it, integration means nothing, right? If I ask you to give me a definition of segregation, you give me examples of it,
Right.
but you can't give me a definition. You can't say, well, it's separation of blacks and whites. Well, okay, what do you mean separation? Because we weren't separated in the house. If it lets you say, all right, well, we were either in an attic or the basement, but how many mixed children did you have? So that separation didn't occur for very long. Or maybe we were in our house, or in the shed. But again, you still had the mixed babies, so that didn't happen very long. You have people who worked in the house, worked in the field. They still came across each other. So you didn't have a spatial relationship that was distant. You had a power relationship that was distant, which was white supremacy racism, right? So since white supremacy racism was at its heart, that didn't change, it only evolved. So again,
So take us into Rocky Balboa.
Okay, back to Rocky Balboa. Okay, so again, now after Rocky Balboa, you had him fight again. He fought the heavyweight champion at 60 years old. Now you tell me, what 60-year-old can fight the heavyweight champion? And who was the heavyweight champion at the time? His name was Mason the Line Dixon. What's the Mason-Dixon line?
Divides the North and the South.
Right. But also, what line does Rocky represent as well? The color line. So the thing about it is that, he fought the heavyweight champion again at 60, and they went the distance, right? But for a 60-year-old ex-champion to fight the world champion to the distance is a victory for him. Because Rocky's nickname was also the Italian Stallion. What does that mean? What's a stallion? It's a horse, right? Horse is a phallic symbol. So Rocky's name also represents white power from the penis. That's why he was always able to fight these black men, and if not beat them, put a great showing up so he can express the power of white supremacy, the power of the white male virility, right? Now, later on, they have Creed. So Creed is, part of the series of the Rocky movies. So you have Adonis Creed, again, a Greek use of beauty, and Creed means belief, the belief in the beauty of white people, right? So he wants to fight, so he goes to Rocky, right? Because you need the old white man in order to bring out the greatness of the black hero. Whether it is, what's that Black Lightning TV show, whether it's the Wesley Snipes' Blade, you have these old white teachers who are needed to make black men great. So of course, what's that?
That actually did happen in reality, though. If we take Mike Tyson and Cus D'Amato.
Well, yeah, you have that sometimes. I'm not saying it doesn't happen,
Okay.
But you have the prevailing narrative where, Cus D'Amato made Mike Tyson great. I mean, saw the greatness of Mike Tyson and helped him, but Mike Tyson must have been ahead now, right? So, but with the movie, he was successful because Rocky trained him, right? So the first movie he lost at the end, right? In the second movie that came out, he fought Draco's son, right? Now, when he fought Draco's son, the first time he fought, Rocky didn't train him. Black man trained him. The son of Apollo Creed's trainer trained him. He got killed, right? So then, in order to fight Draco's son again, he had to get Rocky. When Rocky trained, he was able to beat the white man, right? So blacks can't do it on their own. We need white support. We need that white power behind us. Pause. Right? So.
Wait a second now. Go ahead.
Yes. So you see that the symbolism in Rocky, even as an older man, right, still represents white power, white supremacy, and how black people, especially black men, need white folks in order to become successful, or be successful in this country, or in the world for that matter.
Why do you think they use boxing as the backdrop? Because they could have chose any other thing. Why boxing?
Well, I don't really think they could have chosen any other thing. Because, like I said, boxing, when you go to its roots in the U.S., came from the days of bondage, right? So you have to have something connected to slavery, right? So it wouldn't work for football because it's a team sport. It has to be some individual, has to be something combative. Now, what combative individual sport in the U.S. is bigger than boxing? Tennis isn't. And wrestling isn't. So you have to have boxing. So, and again, with this slavery connection, you know, you have, still today, oftentimes, two black men, or two men of color, in the ring, surrounded by white folks cheering them on to beat each other up, which harkens back to those days. So again, it's very symbolic. And because of the symbolic representation, symbolic meaning, it has that much more importance and that much more resonance in the psyche of the person and the people watching.
Why are some of the biggest fights in boxing matchups between two people of different races?
Remember years ago I was in Chicago, right? And it was, I think, Layman Brewster fighting Galata, right?
Yeah.
Right. And it was in Chicago. Now Chicago has a very large Polish population, right? Now Galata, besides beating Riddick Bowe a couple times, he didn't do anything, right? But whenever you are watching a sport, you want to see somebody who looks like you, right? That's why you pay money to see it. I remember years ago, I saw Crush Groove, right? And it was Run DMC and Beastie Boys in it. And Run DMC had a manager named Russell. And he charged the promoter a certain amount for Run DMC, right? He said, all right, I'll pay. How much for Beastie Boys? He said, the same amount as Run DMC. He said, what? Beastie Boys ain't big Run DMC. The guy said, all right, I'll pay it. Then Russell left. And then his partner said, why are you going to pay the same amount? The man said, I want to see a bunch of niggas perform. So, as a little kid, I remember that. So back to this fight between Layman Brewster, I believe it was, and Andrew Galata in Chicago, you know, the crowd was all white. Room for Galata. Got knocked out the first round. They were heated because he was their great white hope. But he lost again. So whenever you have this fight or these fights, you want to try to get the broadest crowd. Two blacks are basically going to draw black people, right? Mm-hmm. If you have a white and a black, or Asian and a black, or Latino and a black, you can have a mixed crowd. You can draw more, right? So you know when Floyd fought what's the guy named Canelo, he wanted to fight a Mexican. He know Mexican. He fought him on what's the Mexican? Cinco de Mayo, right? Marketing. You know, you have Amir Khan fighting Crawford. Amir Khan's a bum. But guess what? He's going to bring a different demographic, because Crawford, you're going to beat anybody you put in front of him. Mm-hmm. Next time he'll probably fight Pacquiao, or Pacquiao may fight Errol Spence. Again, Pacquiao Filipino. Bring the Filipino crowd. So it's just good marketing. Sometimes, of course, you got to fight who's the best fighter. But if you can get a fighter who is from a different racial group or demographic, we're going to draw more. Remember the movie The Great White Hype? Mm-hmm. You know, Sam Jackson, Damon Wayans? Sam Jackson was playing the Don King figure. He said, I need a white heavyweight champion more than white America does. He wanted to sell tickets, right? So he pulled out this guy who had an amateur record but he didn't fight professionally, who was, wasn't fighting at all. He brought him up to fight Damon Wayans. Damon Wayans knocked him out in the first round. But again, he knew that in order to sell the next fight with a black fight, he'd have the heavyweight fight a white fighter. So it's just marketing. Everything's marketing and symbolism. Because again, they're not going to say directly, you know what? We know that white folks need to see somebody in the ring who looks like them in order to participate or to pay for it many times. Same with white NBA players. You know, a lot of white NBA players are there because they're white.
So, but let's take, for instance, when you talk about the economics of it all. the biggest fights Ali had were against other black fighters, Foreman
Right.
and Frazier.
Right? That was because the white fighters were garbage. They won it. How many times Jerry Corey fought Ali and Foreman and them guys? Lost every time. There's only so much water in that well. Right? So, like, remember, when Jerry Cooney came out, they wanted to beat Larry Holmes. When Larry Holmes fought Jerry Cooney, right, there was a phone in Jerry Cooney's locker room that if he had won, Ronald Reagan was going to call and congratulate him. When Cooney got his ass knocked out, what happened? No call from Reagan, but Reagan also didn't call Larry Holmes. So, believe me, you know, if there was a white fighter who had the ability, they would big him up. Lomachenko, they bigging him up. You know, he had like 8 professional fights before he got his title shot, and he lost one. He lost one of them. Now he's like 12-1 or 13-1, something like that. And they're saying he's the best pound for pound fighter in the world. Him and Crawford. You know, you have 13 fights, 14 fights. Now I'm not saying he can't fight, and I'm not taking anything away from the man. But there is symbolism behind his rise, and you can't dismiss that. You know, just because you point out a fact doesn't mean the whole, the whole picture is now negated. I'm just pointing out some facts about the picture.